We shall now discuss love for one's parents. One's parents have performed for one the invaluable service of having initiated one's life. If one values one's own life, one ought to value the act by which one's life was initiated, and to respond with gratitude to the individuals who initiated one's life. Of course, beyond initiating one's life, parents have a responsibility to sustain it until one is capable of comfortably sustaining it on one's own. This is so because while one's life is the greatest possible value, the vicissitudes which endanger one's life as a child are not at all valuable. One's parents gave one life, for which they should be thanked, but they also enabled one to be vulnerable to such vicissitudes, for which they ought to compensate by eliminating or mitigating the vicissitudes whenever possible. Thus, parents are responsible for supporting the lives of their children. Of course, different parents have different opinions of what this support ought to constitute, as well as different levels of devotion to carrying out their perceived obligations for their children. The parents who give their children an extensive amount of support and are consistent in delivering it should be esteemed and loved by their children, because they provide for their children a basis for flourishing in the material, intellectual, and emotional sense. If one's parents give one sufficient food of high quality, a reliable place to live, an intellectual upbringing suitable to one's capacities, and emotional support whenever justified, then one should, out of gratitude, love one's parents without reservation. If one's parents fail substantially in any of these areas to provide active support, they might still do enough in the others to merit a qualified love. If, however, one's parents act abusively, to the unambiguous severe detriment of one's flourishing in one or more of the above areas, then they should not be loved, but rather seen as obstacles to one's further flourishing. Particularly, if one's parents intend to abuse their children, then they should not be loved, but reviled. While their contribution to one's coming into existence should still be recognized and appreciated, one should consider oneself to have no further obligations to them besides expressing this abstract appreciation. Now we discuss love for one's children. When one brings children into this world, one has an obligation to take care of them, until keeping them under one's care would impede their further prospects rather than enhance them. This evaluation is necessarily grounded in the circumstances of time and place, as well as the specific variations in judgment among different parents. Yet, while there is not necessarily a universal set duration of the parental obligation, such duration is still extensive under any legitimate interpretation. One's parental obligation alone should lead one to act in the best interest of one's children until they achieve full self-direction. However, in addition to carrying out the parental obligation, one should also love one's children as specific individuals, and enjoy interacting with them and facilitating their transition to self-direction. Not only will each specific child have qualities that are good, irrespective of his status as a child, the parent is also in a unique position to help develop these qualities so as to make them better. The parent's decisions will contribute greatly to whether the child becomes a prosperous, competent, happy person, or a destitute, incompetent, unhappy one. If one valued the latter state over the former, one would value one's child's misery over its fulfillment, which is perverse. If one were indifferent between the flourishing and destitution of a human being under one's direct power, then this would reflect poorly on one's opinion of one's own importance, dignity, and agency in the world. If a parent is unable to substantively enhance the life of a being whom he or she has created, and who remains directly dependent on him or her, then what kind of powerless, resigned creature is he or she? Love for one's children, then, arises from a desire to cultivate competencies in them. Every parent should experience the utmost pleasure in bestowing upon a young creature the skills and autonomy that the parent already enjoys. Like love for one's parents, love for one's children is broadly conditional on those children having some meritorious qualities. These qualities are not merely physical or intellectual skills, but also moral virtues, including traits such as the child's gentleness and love for his or her parents. Thus, it is possible to love a child who will never achieve the full set of adult competencies, such as a severely disabled or autistic child, on account of redeeming personal qualities. But a child that commits severe moral transgressions on the caliber of murder, rape, and sadism should no longer be loved by his parents. There are no redeeming qualities or competencies that compensate for transgressions of that caliber. Parents may justifiably tolerate many lesser transgressions in their children, but only so long as those transgressions are reparable and efforts are made by the children to repair them. Now we can discuss the last of the four primary kinds of love, which is love for one's spouse. Unlike any of the other three loves, love for one's spouse is symmetrical. It neither involves acknowledgement of the power of another, nor the benevolent exertion of power on another. A child is under his parents' benevolent power, and the innocent are frequently under the benevolent protection of those capable of defending them. Spousal love is devoid of power asymmetries, and its participants are more akin to allies than to hegemons or protectorates. The spousal relationship is not legitimately forced on anyone by either people or circumstances. Children do not choose their parents, and biological parents do not choose their specific children, although adoption and selection of foster parents by children does sometimes make these types of love dependent on choice. Moreover, if one encounters an innocent creature and one is a moral person, one has no immediate choice about whether to love that creature. The love follows from the innocence. But spousal love is based purely on choice and entered into with no intention to exert or suffer asymmetrical power. Whence arises such a love? The quality which elicits spousal love is the virtue of one's spouse, namely the ethical goodness of his or her behavior. Such virtue may include qualities such as honesty, gentleness, integrity, fidelity, rationality, productivity, prudence, foresightedness, benevolence, love of life, and the ability to improve and beautify the world around oneself. Not all of these qualities need to be present in a spouse worthy of love, and not all need to be present at the same time. But there should exist a preponderance of such qualities, and those qualities which are deficient should be striven after to an appreciable extent. The purpose of a spousal relationship is not primarily to cultivate virtue or even to reinforce it, though these often are desirable secondary consequences of the relationship. Rather, a spousal relationship aims at rewarding virtue already present. If one acknowledges certain moral qualities as highly desirable, then one should be willing to confer upon the holder of these qualities rewards of a sort that no one else would receive. Moreover, the enjoyment of the presence and company of a holder of those qualities is the natural consequence of considering such qualities as virtuous. Spousal relationships may also serve as a highly conducive context for the successful upbringing of children. But this is neither a necessity of spousal relationships, nor even of the act which may sometimes result in procreation. To reward another for his or her virtue does not necessarily imply the need to create and raise other human beings with him or her. The latter object may be desirable in itself, and may be best attained by an alliance with another highly virtuous, admirable, and competent being. But it is possible for spousal love to exist in separation from love for one's children, and vice versa. Moreover, the act of physical intercourse within a spousal relationship need not be conceived of as solely procreational or solely recreational. The view of such an act as a reward for extraordinary virtue neither obliges one to use it reproductively, nor diminishes it to mere entertainment.